Machiavelli understood something that most people never dare to confront. The strongest version of yourself is not the one that emerges naturally. It is not given by fate, nor is it found in comfort. It is forged. It is engineered. It is constructed through constant reinvention. The world is ruthless to those who remain the same. A man who clings to his old identity, his old habits, his old ways of thinking, is already dead. Power belongs to those who can shed their skin like a serpent, adapting, reshaping, and evolving. This is not self-improvement. This is not a gentle polishing of character. This is transformation by fire, the Machiavellian method of power reinvention. Destroy the old self. The first step in becoming the strongest version of yourself is not addition, it is subtraction. It is not about stacking new habits on top of old ones, but about erasing the very identity that has held you captive. Machiavelli understood that men are chained not by their enemies, but by their own attachment to who they believe themselves to be. The past is seductive. It whispers to you with nostalgia, reminding you of your old comforts, your old excuses, your old ways of thinking, is already dead. Power belongs to those who can shed their skin like a serpent, adapting, reshaping, and evolving. This is not self-improvement. This is not a gentle polishing of character. This is transformation by fire, the Machiavellian method of power reinvention. Destroy the old self. The first step in becoming the strongest version of yourself is not addition, it is subtraction. It is not about stacking new habits on top of old ones, but about erasing the very identity that has held you captive. Machiavelli understood that men are chained not by their enemies, but by their own attachment to who they believe themselves to be. The past is seductive. It whispers to you with nostalgia, reminding you of your old comforts, your old excuses, your old ways of thinking, is already dead. Power belongs to those who can shed their skin like a serpent, adapting, reshaping, and evolving. This is not self-improvement. This is not a gentle polishing of character. This is transformation by fire, the Machiavellian method of power reinvention. Destroy the old self. The first step in becoming the strongest version of yourself is not addition, it is subtraction. It is not about stacking new habits on top of old ones, but about erasing the very identity that has held you captive. Machiavelli understood that men are chained not by their enemies, but by their own attachment to who they believe themselves to be. The past is seductive. It whispers to you with nostalgia, reminding you of your old comforts, your old excuses, your old failures disguised as lessons. But here lies the brutal truth. The man you are today is the greatest obstacle to the man you could become. To reinvent yourself, you must be willing to take the knife to your own skin, to cut away the familiar, to bury the very self that has brought you this far. The palace of power cannot be built on foundations that are already cracked. It must rise from scorched earth. Burn your banner. Burn your name. Burn the image the world holds of you. This is why destruction must come first, because only in the ashes does true reinvention find space to breathe. The old you carries too many weaknesses, too many predictable patterns that others have already mapped and memorized. If people think they can define you, then they can control you. If your enemies expect you to react in a certain way, then they already hold the leash around your neck. To destroy the old self is to break that leash, to become something unrecognizable, something untouchable. This is why snakes shed their skin, not because it is convenient, but because it is survival. And so, if you truly desire power, you must not cling to the story you have told yourself about who you are. That story is a prison. Kill it. If the world believes you are weak, betray them with strength. If they believe you are predictable, shatter them with surprise. If they believe they already know you, transform into a man they cannot comprehend. Destruction is painful. It will feel like death, but that death is the price of rebirth. For only when you kill the old self with ruthless finality does the strongest version of you rise, forged not by chance, but by deliberate fire. 2. Master the art of masks. Machiavelli revealed a truth that most men never grasp. People do not see you as you are. They see only the mask you present. Reality, in human affairs, is not built on truth, but on perception. And perception is a theater. Reinvention, therefore, is never complete until you learn to perform. Until you learn to wear masks with the same skill an actor wears costumes. This does not make you false. It makes you adaptable. It makes you untouchable. The strongest version of yourself is not fixed in one form. He is many forms, shifting and transforming depending on what the moment demands. Calm in chaos, ruthless in negotiations, compassionate in alliances, cold in betrayal. Each mask is a weapon, and the man who can change his face at will is the man who is never cornered.
Those who cling to authenticity in every moment are slaves to their own nature. They reveal their intentions too easily, expose their weaknesses too openly, and play the same role until others can predict their every move. But the Machiavellian man understands that power lies in misdirection. If people believe you are endlessly confident, even when doubt gnaws at you, they will treat you as such. If they believe you are generous, they will not notice when you are calculating. If they believe you are merciful, they will not suspect your ruthlessness. The mask creates reality. Appearances shape truth. And when you control appearances, you do not just manage perception, you control the battlefield itself. To master masks is to abandon the illusion of being one true self. Instead, you must become many selves, chosen deliberately, each crafted with precision. This does not mean losing your essence. It means weaponizing it. Imagine being both the wolf and the shepherd. Imagine being trusted and feared, admired and envied, loved and despised, all depending on what advantage the situation requires. That is not duplicity. It is strategy. The man who can wear only one face will always be limited, but the man who can become anyone at any time is limitless. Reinvention is not only internal, it is performance, and performance is power. 3. Embrace necessity, not ideals. The weak cling to ideals. They dream of the man they want to be, of how the world should be, of rules and virtues that exist only in philosophy books and sermons. But Machiavelli, ever the realist, tore these illusions apart. He saw that life is not governed by ideals, it is governed by necessity. The strongest version of yourself cannot afford to be chained to abstract notions of perfection, morality, or honor if those ideals weaken you. To survive, to dominate, to reinvent yourself, you must be willing to bend, to shift, to transform into whatever the moment requires. The battlefield of life does not reward the man who insists on fighting by principles. It rewards the man who adapts to win. Consider the king at war who sacrifices his gold, his comfort, even his reputation to feed and sustain his soldiers. The idealist might say he should protect his treasury, that a king's wealth is sacred, but necessity whispers another truth. Without soldiers, without loyalty, without survival, wealth means nothing. Principles that weaken you are nothing but chains, illusions that blind you to the reality of power. Machiavelli knew this well, and so must you. It is better to bend to what must be done than to die clinging to what should be done. Reinvention, then, is not fantasy. It is not a wishful vision of who you hope to become. Reinvention is cold, strategic, and brutally realistic. Ask yourself not, who do I want to be, but instead, who must I be right now to win? This question is the key to transformation. The answer will not always be comfortable. Sometimes it will require sacrifice. Sometimes it will demand ruthlessness. Sometimes it will mean abandoning virtues you once held sacred. But the man who adapts to necessity becomes unbreakable. He survives when others perish. He rises where others fall. And in the end, his transformation is not built on illusions of who he wished to be. It is built on the hard steel of who he needed to be. That is the Machiavellian method. That is reinvention through necessity.
4. Rebuild with disciplined cruelty. Once the old self has been destroyed, and necessity has cleared away illusions, the act of rebuilding begins. But here is where most men falter. They rebuild themselves with softness, with leniency, with excuses. Machiavelli would scoff at such weakness. Reinvention must be guided by cruelty, not indulgence. But cruelty, when spoken in this way, is not chaos, not savagery. It is precision. It is discipline applied without hesitation. Just as a blacksmith must strike iron with exact force over and over without mercy for the metal, so too must you strike yourself into shape. Every blow removes weakness. Every repetition removes hesitation. Every moment of discipline burns away softness until only the sharp edge of strength remains. This cruelty must begin with yourself. Spare no tolerance for laziness, for self-pity, for distractions that waste your life. Comfort is poison. Indulgence is rot. And the man who forgives himself too often becomes his own executioner. If you would reinvent yourself, you must act as your own ruler. And a ruler who hesitates to punish his kingdom soon loses control. When a flaw appears, strike it down. When a weakness lingers, cut it away. Machiavelli praised leaders who used cruelty not constantly, but swiftly and decisively to establish order. Apply this lesson inwardly. Do not live in endless self-correction. Be ruthless in the moments it matters and then move forward with clarity. The strongest version of yourself will not come from chance, and it will not emerge through comfort. It is forged by deliberate pain, by the willingness to discipline yourself when no one is watching, by the refusal to negotiate with your own weakness. Think of yourself as the blacksmith and the blade, both hammer and steel. With every act of cruelty toward your own hesitation, with every strike of discipline against your own flaws, you are remaking yourself into something dangerous, sharp, and enduring. Reinvention is not gentle rebirth, it is violent transformation. And the man who embraces this cruelty is the man who rises above all others. 5. Control your narrative. Machiavelli understood that men do not live by facts, they live by stories. History itself is not a chronicle of truth, but a theater of narratives, shaped and bent by those powerful enough to tell them. And the same law applies to your life. Reinvention does not end with the private work of discipline and destruction. It must extend outward into the eyes of others. Because if you do not control your narrative, others will write it for you. And once they do, you become a prisoner of their perception. To truly become the strongest version of yourself, you must seize authorship of your story and dictate how the world perceives you. This means you cannot simply change. You must make others believe you have changed. The man who silently transforms without altering his reputation will always be dragged back into the gravity of his old self. People are comfortable with who they think you are. They will resist your evolution. But here is the strategy: consistency of projection. Speak differently, act differently. Carry yourself with the weight of who you are becoming, not who you were. Over time, the narrative shifts. Doubt turns to curiosity. Curiosity turns to recognition. And recognition turns into acceptance of the new you. Just as rulers erase their failures by rewriting them as victories, you must erase your past identity by overshadowing it with your new performance.
Remember, people do not care about truth. They care about the story that seems most convincing. Your reinvention is not complete until you craft a version of yourself that others cannot ignore. If they once saw you as timid, let them now witness decisiveness. If they once thought you soft, show them cold strength. If they once believed you powerless, display command. Narratives, once cemented, become reality in the eyes of the crowd. The Machiavellian man understands that perception is the throne upon which power rests. Control your narrative, and you control the world. Fail to control it, and the world will bury you in a story that was never yours. Wield both virtue and vice. Machiavelli shattered one of the greatest illusions of mankind, the belief that strength is built solely on virtue. He warned that the man who tries to be good at all times will inevitably be destroyed by those who are not. Yet he also understood that raw vice, left unchecked, breeds hatred and rebellion. The secret, then, is balance. To reinvent yourself into the strongest version possible, you must become fluent in both languages, virtue and vice, and wield them as tools rather than prisons. Courage, discipline, and generosity must be cultivated, for they attract trust, loyalty, and admiration. But ruthlessness, deception, and manipulation must also be sharpened, for they protect you from betrayal, exploitation, and attack. The man who masters both is like a swordsman who can fight with either hand, unpredictable, dangerous, and nearly impossible to defeat. Most men fall into the trap of extremes. The virtuous man clings to his goodness and becomes prey for the cunning. The vicious man clings to his cruelty and becomes despised, isolated, and eventually destroyed. But the Machiavellian man does not worship either extreme. He studies both. He adapts, shifting between masks of virtue and weapons of vice, depending on what the situation demands. If kindness secures loyalty, he is kind. If fear prevents rebellion, he is feared. If honesty builds trust, he speaks truth. If deception ensures survival, he lies without hesitation. This is not hypocrisy. It is strategy. It is the art of power. To wield both virtue and vice is to rise above the ordinary man who is bound by one. Reinvention means becoming whole, not in the sense of moral purity, but in the sense of completeness. You are no longer a one-dimensional figure, easily read and easily played. You are the shepherd when men need comfort, and the wolf when they need correction. You are admired when it benefits you, feared when it protects you, and respected at all times because no one ever knows which version of you they will meet. The strongest version of yourself does not reject vice, nor does he worship virtue. He uses both, bending them as weapons in his arsenal, and in doing so, he becomes untouchable. 7. Become unpredictable. Nothing terrifies an enemy more than unpredictability. Machiavelli observed that once a man's patterns are understood, he is already conquered. Predictability is weakness because it gives others the map to your mind, the blueprint to your actions. If people know what you will do, they can trap you. If they know how you will react, they can provoke you. But when you become unpredictable, you rob them of control. They are left in fear, confusion, and hesitation, never certain how to approach you, never confident in how to counter you. Reinvention requires that you shed the safety of being consistent and embrace the power of surprise.
This does not mean acting at random or descending into chaos. That too is weakness because it makes you reckless. True unpredictability is controlled and deliberate. It is the art of appearing stable while quietly altering course. It is the skill of shifting strategies mid-battle, mid-conversation, mid-lifetime, so that no one ever fully grasps your limits. One day you may show mercy, and the next you may strike without hesitation. One day you may appear generous, and the next utterly calculating. People who deal with you should never be allowed the comfort of certainty. They should always approach you with caution, wondering, who is he today, the lamb or the lion? To be unpredictable is to stay in motion, to reinvent yourself continuously so that others cannot pin you to a single role. It is to keep enemies off balance, allies alert, and rivals perpetually guessing. The man who becomes predictable has already surrendered his power, but the man who embodies unpredictability becomes like a storm, always shifting, always dangerous, impossible to contain. In this way, unpredictability itself becomes a weapon. When no one can forecast your moves, they cannot prepare for your rise. And so, the strongest version of yourself is not static. It is fluid, volatile, untouchable, a mystery that no one ever solves. 8. Rule yourself first. Machiavelli warned that a man who cannot govern himself will never be able to govern anything else. To reinvent yourself into the strongest version, you must begin with dominion over your own impulses, emotions, and desires. Too many men seek to command the world while remaining slaves to their appetites. They chase wealth but cannot master their spending. They crave respect but cannot control their anger. They demand loyalty but cannot discipline their own minds. This is why so many rise quickly only to collapse just as fast, because they built their power on unstable foundations. True reinvention begins not with conquering others, but with conquering the self. If you cannot sit still in silence without being consumed by distraction, if you cannot endure hardship without breaking, if you cannot resist temptation when no one is watching, then you are not yet ready to command anything greater. Machiavelli taught that fortune controls half of life, but the other half is shaped by discipline and foresight. That half is where sovereignty over yourself is forged. You must learn to restrain your anger when provoked, to remain calm when the world demands panic, and to act with clarity when others are blinded by emotion. The man who rules himself becomes unshakable. No insult can pierce him, no temptation can seduce him, no storm can drown him. His power comes not from external validation, but from inner mastery. He becomes the still center around which chaos revolves. This is the foundation of all reinvention. Without self-rule, every mask you wear will slip, every strategy you employ will fail, every gain you make will crumble. The strongest version of yourself must be untouchable at the core, anchored by discipline. Rule yourself as a king rules his kingdom, with order, with law, with punishment for weakness, and reward for strength.
Once you hold absolute command over your inner world, the outer world becomes infinitely easier to conquer. For the man who has mastered himself cannot be ruled by anyone else.
9. Make sacrifices to gain power. No reinvention is possible without sacrifice. Machiavelli knew that men who cling too tightly to comfort, to possessions, to their familiar routines, inevitably weaken themselves. Power is not gained by adding more to your life. It is often gained by stripping things away. The strongest version of yourself does not grow fat on excess. He sharpens himself by relinquishing what is unnecessary. Every great leader, every man who rose above his peers, did so because he was willing to endure loss for the sake of strength. He gave up pleasures others could not resist. He abandoned securities others would never release. He denied himself comforts that softened lesser men. And in those sacrifices, he built a reserve of discipline and resilience that made him unstoppable. Understand this. Sacrifice is not loss, it is investment. The prince who eats simply while his court indulges is not depriving himself. He is building endurance, detachment, and control. The general who sacrifices rest to prepare for war is not losing comfort, he is buying victory. The man who gives up shallow friendships, wasted time, or fleeting pleasures is not diminishing his life. He is creating space for power to grow. Most men avoid sacrifice because it feels like pain. But Machiavelli teaches that the wise man sees it as strategy. Each sacrifice is a seed planted, and with time, those seeds grow into authority, mastery, and domination. The weak cling to everything. They hoard possessions, relationships, and habits that drag them down. They are afraid to let go, and so they never rise. But the strong understand that to reinvent oneself means to cut away what no longer serves, to abandon even parts of the self that once felt essential. Reinvention requires a kind of ruthless pruning. If you cannot let go, you cannot transform. The strongest version of you will not be built by what you keep, but by what you are willing to sacrifice. That is the price of power, and it is the reason so few ever achieve it.
10. Live as if you are your own creation. The final step in becoming the strongest version of yourself is the realization that you are not discovered, you are made. Machiavelli understood that power does not fall into the lap of the passive, and greatness does not emerge from chance. The strongest man is not the one who drifts through life reacting to circumstance, but the one who deliberately sculpts himself, chisel in hand, day by day, blow by blow. Each decision, each act, each moment of discipline is a strike against the stone of your past, shaping, refining, and revealing the version of yourself that the world has never seen. To reinvent yourself is to act as your own creator, to become both the sculptor and the masterpiece, commanding every curve and edge with precision. This is not a metaphor, it is strategy. Just as the artist does not lament the rough edges of the marble, but chisels away what is unnecessary to reveal the form within, you must remove the habits, weaknesses, and illusions that obscure your potential. Do not wait for opportunity to reveal who you are. You must forge it into existence. Each mask you wear, each sacrifice you make, each act of discipline contributes to the construction of a self that is deliberate, controlled, and unstoppable. You are the architect of your own power, and no one else can dictate the design. Living as if you are your own creation also demands ownership of every choice. No excuses. No blaming fortune. No lamenting circumstance. No hiding behind the failures of the past. Machiavelli admired men who embraced responsibility as power, and you must do the same. Every strength you possess is a product of your intent. Every weakness is the result of neglect.
By consciously shaping yourself, you are no longer at the mercy of the world. You become the force that moves it. Reinvention is not occasional. It is continuous, relentless, eternal. And the man who truly lives as his own creation is the man who transcends fate, defies expectation, and becomes untouchable, unbound, and supreme. Machiavelli's wisdom was not for the faint of heart. Reinvention is not a hobby, not a fleeting self-help trend. It is a necessity for survival and dominance in a world that crushes the stagnant. To become the strongest version of yourself, you must destroy, rebuild, adapt, and perform without end. The weak cling to who they are. The strong endlessly become who they must be. So I leave you with a challenge. Do not remain who you are. Do not let the world define you. Burn the old and reinvent the new. The strongest version of yourself is waiting, not in the future, not in fate, but in the ruthless act of your own creation.